All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And for those who came earlier, you're welcome for the music. I know it was really uplifting for me. Um, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Uh, if we want to present the slides, please. Awesome. Thank you, Robin. Thank you. So thank you, everybody, for coming. We're going to present to this Community College Day for SACNAS Berkeley on things I wish I had known. Advice from graduate students who transferred. And we're just going to go through and we're going to run through and talk about things that we, as transfer students, remember wishing we had known, and some things we wish we didn't know. As you can see right there in the middle, our alternate title used to be How to Avoid That Academic Junk. And we're going to let you know, uh, see if you can dodge that. If we can click through, go to the next slide, please. Yeah, the academic chocolate. And so if our speakers could introduce themselves, starting from the
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Torres, and I'm a first-year PhD student in mechanical engineering.
Hi, everyone. My name is King. I'm a PhD candidate in molecular and cell biology.
What's up, everyone? My name is Robin D. Lopez. I'm a doctoral student in environmental science, policy, and management.
And I am Alexander Alvar. I'm a third-year PhD student in mechanical engineering at UC Berkeley. And let's get this thing started. So first things first, we're going to do a little interactive community practice, a little interactive activity. We're going to do a word cloud. And so the question at hand is, what is one word you would use to describe the transfer process? So what is the word that you think of? And so if we could drop that link in the chat so everyone can just click on it and we could let them enter their word. It's I think this is it. Yep. And it's anonymous. You can just copy it from the chat and enter it into your browser. Just enter what's the word you think of. And I see someone put scared already. Yeah, I remember that. Confusing. I remember that. Definitely. Anxious. Yeah. Expensive. And we're going to go ahead and talk about how expensive it really is and the thoughts around it. Definitely confusing. Daunting. Yeah, it's a big task, but it's also an important one. So it's worth tackling. Confusing is making a big heading right here. We got frustrating and stressful. Exciting. Someone's excited. I remember being a little bit excited. I was mostly scared though. Let's see. Tumultuous. That's an SAT word. Good job. But also true. Intimidating. This is awesome. Thank you everybody for joining in on us and for doing this little community exercise and share. We're going to go ahead and step on through. Next slide, please. Awesome. I'm going to hand over to King.
Hi, again, good afternoon and probably good morning in some places or evening already. My name is King. I'm a PhD candidate again in molecular and cell biology. But before that, I'd just like to share that I'm also a first generation immigrant. I came originally from the Philippines, as hopefully some people know where that is. So, and hopefully that resonates to a lot of people, especially community college, where this is actually the first place where I experienced the American academic system. So moving from the Philippines, and I did my initial step in college at City College of San Francisco, and then transferred to San Francisco State for personal reasons, primarily because as most first generation immigrants, we have both a responsibility to our family in order to provide and also responsibility for ourselves to actually further our education. So while I was actually at City College, and even while I was at SF State, I was working at Home Depot 40 hours a week. So I'm sure this is a common theme that also a lot of people that I've interacted with and became friends with when I was at community college was working probably more than 40 hours a week. So I'm sharing here like a little collage of my life experience. So pictured here in the middle are basically my core group of friends. Pictured here are when we were graduating from San Francisco State. All of us actually went to get our PhDs or are getting our PhDs right now. And as you can see, I guess a humble brag of where we end up going. But I want you to take out from this is that all of these people went to community college first. So, and over here, like, opportunities when I was, after transferring at San Francisco State I was part of a research expedition out in the Pacific Ocean. And in one lifetime, I actually represented the CSU system in Washington, DC. And over here was a picture taken while speaking with Jackie Spear, and not pictured here was talking to Nancy Pelosi about funding undergraduate research at a community college and the CSU system. So why am I sharing you all this? Next slide, please. Because every one of us has a story to tell. And for people who are transferring right now, the most important paper or essay that you'll probably write at this moment is your transfer essay. Change slides, please. So I know writing could be very exhausting and very, it's such a task. But just I want everyone to know, and I wish I knew this very early, that you will write a lot of the times. And it's not just because of getting your foot in the door to transfer, but also your assignments and stuff like. As a scientist, I actually find myself writing a lot more than I would expect. So, key things that I wish I knew very, very early on is to always follow the prompt, whether it's be as specific as possible, and you basically write, and edit. So next slide, please. And the reason why writing is so important, and the reason why I also shared the previous pictures, was that you have, like, writing could be a leverage for you to get that internship, getting you that fellowship, getting you that scholarship, getting admitted, because this is the first thing that they will read about you. So the better you frame yourself and tell your story, because at the end of the day, that's who you are, the better they can represent you. So, and again, like the only way I managed to not work as many hours when I was in community college and transferring to San Francisco State was because of scholarships, and because of, it's a writing exercise at the end of the day. The more you write, I think the better you get. So I would say start early and practice that writing skill. Next slide, please. So I guess a key takeaways that I want people to learn in this module or this short snippet is that writing essay, your transfer essay, is actually a very, very great opportunity to know who you are and to self-reflect of the many life experiences you may have. And start early if you haven't started, if you're thinking of transferring in the fall, or maybe not this year, but the following year, it's always good. It's never a bad practice to start early. When you're writing, always be specific. Try to use simple words and don't repeat yourself. And the reason why you want to start early as well is, that means that you can actually check for typos and spelling or grammatical errors, because those are distracting. And we want to make sure that you put your best foot forward when you're applying to these things. And trust me, If you really want to get those scholarships or internships, this is the first thing that they will read. And I wish I knew that very early on. And with that, I'm going to transfer it to Robin.
Thank you very much, King, for that primer and getting things going. As you heard earlier, my name is Robin D. Lopez. I'm on social media if any of you want to connect. My handles are Richmond Life for my personal accounts on Twitter and Instagram. I'm going to be honest though, I'm not really active on them right now for the next several weeks because I'm working on my qualifications exam at UC Berkeley. So kind of distant myself from there, but best believe when I'm back on, like things get wild and spicy. As well, as you previously heard, I'm also a PhD student. I'm in my third year. I've also have been working with the U.S. Department of Energy at the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab for the past 11 years. God, it sounds weird saying that, but yeah, I've been in this research game for a hot minute, and I think something that's worth acknowledging though is that my path was not linear. And you've heard that already from King. You're going to hear that from Lisa and Alexander as well. That is a commonality between all of us. And I think that's something that resonates with many of us, many of you who are in the space with us right now, that our path to academia isn't just graduate high school and go straight to college and then go straight to graduate school. It never works out like that. And I think that's the beauty of the struggle. But what also makes it beautiful is the mentors that are in place. And right now, what you see is just, photos of, of that journey that I've taken. That first photo was way before my time in academia, back when I used to be trapping out in Richmond, California. And I had some good, interesting times and moments, things that I don't want to really digress into, but I will share that that lifestyle taught me a lot about how to talk to people, how to finesse myself in conversation, how to adapt to different situations, especially like when it's literally my life on the line. And what I've learned is like those were skills that were easily transferable and adaptable. And I'm not saying you have to have gone through the experiences I went through to have those skills. The reality is we all go through certain experiences in life, like you heard from King previously. Those are all adaptable skills that you could carry on to academia. And at that time, I didn't realize that. I didn't know that. Not until my mentors pointed that out to me, who were also mentors of color. And they're like, hey, Robin, like, you do know, like, your ability to communicate with people and your ability to, like, bring people together, like, that's something that would make you phenomenal in academia. And so that led me to outreach. You see that photo below, that's out in West Oakland, in my dad's old neighborhood, actually. He used to live next to the Black Panthers headquarters. And I always have a lot of pride in that. And just being able to go back to my roots and using science as a way to do that. That picture below that is my first experience in the lab, working as a researcher for the U.S. Department of Energy. That these middle slide photos are just me cooling with some soils. They are not food. They are not, I don't think they're edible to humans, but I have heard from people, I'm not going to call anyone out, that they look like delicious brownies. But in the process of doing all this, it's helped me also understand that science shouldn't have any borders. I mean, we talk about that in the context of people who migrate and people who go to different areas for a better life. And I think that's analogous to science as well. There shouldn't be any borders. We should be allowed to be creative and be our whole unapologetic selves. And science has allowed me to do that. But it was mentors who pushed me to come into that space and to really tap into my roots. And that's what those last set of pictures are, just me playing in the water. Like I'm a water boy. Like I love water because it's always flowing and I'm always moving. That next photo is me when I decided to go to Mexico and really tap in with those roots and literally pull the roots out and see what it's all about. And again, this is all because of mentors. And so this is what I want to talk about in this module, is focusing on mentorship. That photo that you're seeing on the slide deck right now, that handsome young man is me. That other handsome young man is my nephew. A couple years ago, several years ago actually, when we had the March for Science, I was one of the organizers, and SACNAS was one of our partners, and so they had these dope shirts that said "Strong Roots Support a Growing STEM," and so I got one for my nephew, and I don't think we could pull off the matching thing anymore because he's kind of grown. But I think of mentorship for me personally, like when I'm interacting with my nieces and nephews, and what did that mean for their development and growth, and trying to translate that into academia and our expectations and mentorship in general. And so, what I will say before I proceed is that these, what I'm about to share is more or less a some of the commonalities between myself, King, Lisa, and Alexander, what we felt was most important to highlight. This is by no means a comprehensive list, and by no means do you have to operate with everything that I'm sharing. This is more so to be a resource and a guide for you. But without further ado, I'll say when it comes to expectations and mentorship, you're entitled to have your own expectations. You don't need anyone's permission to have expectations for what you want and what you need. That said, it's important to leverage and have that optimization of social capital. I put that in quotes because that's not a term everyone is readily familiar with. And so I'll explain that a bit later, but social capital is very similar to the idea of financial capital, where you have currency and you can use that currency to buy up things. Think of that as your social network and the people around you. You're not buying up people. We ain't buying nobody. They ain't happening. But we can tap into that capital to build a network and to build upon the goals that we want. And so that said, you definitely want expectations, your mentorship relationship to focus on that mentor to focus on being a champion and an accomplice in your pursuit through all your successes and failures. And that's something I believe Lisa's going to dive into a bit later. And I intentionally used the word accomplice because that's a notch above just being an ally in your pursuit. The accomplice is going to be right there with you, like ready to get in the nitty gritty of it all. But also, you want someone who's going to be socially and culturally responsive and supportive to what you want to do and who you are. So, in doing all that and bringing together that building mutual aid and that asset-based framework for mentee growth, being you. And that said, everything that I just mentioned on that past slide, you don't typically find that in one person. And I think it's important to acknowledge that you don't need to limit yourself to just one mentor. It's okay to have multiple mentors. Mentorship comes in varying forms. They could be informal, they could be your research mentor, your supervisors, your coworkers, your peers, classmates, what have you. And I'll be very transparent in saying my best mentors have been my peers, the ones who have held me accountable and kept me motivated to be like, no, Robin, like you can't be slipping like that. Like there's a lot of people watching you type of deal. And so, holding me accountable and reminding me that my goals are bigger than my own individual interests. And I think that's something to also take into account with these relationships that you have with your mentors. Um, who, how are you going to benefit and how are they going to benefit? And, trying to tune that into more so that mutual aid that I was referring to. Um, but yeah, that said, relationship with your mentors, they do vary and it's relevant again to your respective needs and expectations. We all come in differently with different things that we need, and that's okay. You don't need to pigeonhole yourself into specific ideals of what a mentee is supposed to be or what a mentor is supposed to be for you. You know yourself better than anyone else, and that's important. And as I said, it's okay to have multiple mentors at once. And what the best way that's helped me think about this is to think of mentors as your personal board of directors for your development and navigation. These are the people that are going to be your guides in this physical world, in this physical life. I'm semi-spiritual, and so I think of this more so like analogous to how my ancestors guide me spiritually into this world with intent and care. And so I think that's something that's translatable to this concept of having your board of directors of mentors, people who are going to guide you with intent, love, and care. But sometimes you look at yourself and you're like, oh, snaps, is this a mentor? You come across that person and you think, man, this person might be a mentor, and then you're kind of chatting with them and you're like, I don't know, like there's something up with this person. And that's okay to question it. That's okay to question the relationship. That means you have self-awareness of what's going on and the interactions you're having. Uh, but I also understand, I think we all understand, it could be confusing to ask yourself the right question and or know what to ask yourself to figure out if this is a mentor that you have in place. And so these, again, are not comprehensive questions, but these are questions you should consider. Is the mentor helping to address concerns of diversity and representation in STEM field? Does the mentor recognize how representation translates into access for resources and community support? Is the mentor asking how they can better serve minoritized and historically marginalized folks? Uh, those who may be undocumented or DACA student, LGBTQIA+, um, or just the whole, generally speaking, the context of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. How do they serve those minoritized individuals? Does your mentor encourage you to prioritize your health, physical, mental, or emotional? And is your mentor actively listening to you and expressing value in your perspective, ideas, and experiences? You don't want a one-sided relationship where the mentor is constantly telling you what you need to do or what's best for you. It's important for the mentor to also take into account what you have to say and what you have to share. And I'll say anecdotally, as an example from my personal experience, that second to the last point I mentioned about prioritizing your health. Um, I had a research mentor uh, who was sending me off to South Dakota for several weeks. And he had asked, he's like, are you comfortable being out there by yourself for 3 weeks? And he said, because your health is paramount and you can't do good work if your health is not in check. And I kind of had an idea of what he meant, but I wanted to get it out of him. So I was like, what are you trying to say? He said, well, I care about mental health. And if you need to come back here on the weekend to be with your family, then that's okay. And so he allowed for the budget to be approved for me to fly back on the weekend, even though it cost extra money. It allowed me to kind of have my mental health in check, because my work in South Dakota, I was working underground for 10 hours a day, would not see any daylight. So I really needed that interaction with my family. South Dakota was a very isolating place. I really didn't see anyone who looked like me. And so that's what I mean when I say someone who prioritizes your health. Excuse me about my voice. Um, I do want to close it off though with this idea of social capital that I'd mentioned earlier, and I had also mentioned asset-based framework. And these are critical things you want in a mentorship relationship. And so I'll just close it out with this, that issues of inequities can be partially resolved by leveraging social capital as a collective. Additionally, working with asset-based framework model empowers skills and talents we naturally bring forth. So this is a gentle reminder to advocate for yourself and for other folks in our community as we navigate an oppressive system. Find those mentors with the same shared values as you. Thank you, and I will be passing the baton on to Lisa.
Thanks, Robin. So hi, everyone. Again, my name is Lisa, and I'm a first-year mechanical engineering PhD student. I grew up in San Carlos, California, in the Bay Area. And to share a brief overview of my journey, initially I started off with my parents telling me senior year of high school that I would have to pay my way through college, and knowing nothing about college and being a first generation and low income student, community college was an easy choice. And so I started off at Kenyatta College in Redwood City, California. And then I transferred to UC Berkeley and graduated with my bachelor's in mechanical engineering. And the job that I had right after graduating, I realized it did not fulfill me at all. And so I ended up taking a detour and exploring the world of healthcare. And so I worked at a medical device company and knew right away I wanted to get my master's because I wanted autonomy and I wanted to be part I wanted to be a part of the decision-making process and didn't want to be a lab tech. And so I ended up attending Columbia University in New York City and got my master's in biomedical engineering. And the job that I got right after that was at a hospital specializing in orthopedic surgery. And that is where I became hooked on biomechanics research and knew that in order to be a presence in this field, I would need a PhD. So really my career and academic journey has had many different twists and turns, and I've had to navigate a complete career change, which is shown in the two center pictures. You know, one day you're wearing a hard hat and the next day you're wearing a lab coat. But not pictured was the inevitable hardships that I experienced. And I would say my first biggest chancla was actually my first semester when I transferred to Berkeley. I ended up failing all my classes and was placed on academic probation. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk to you about the transfer process and let you all in on the nitty-gritty of everything that I learned from falling on my face. Next slide. So transferring is a tough transition. To have the warmth and comfort of your community college to then a brand new and possibly scary big four-year university is a lot to handle. First, it is so very important to find your crew. Us transfer students come from a lot of different backgrounds, and many times we are older than the average junior in college. So it's crucial to find community and cultivate your support group. And so you can do this in a few different ways. You can ask about programs at your university or your department that are for transfer students. This could be informal or formal events and programs that are held prior to starting your first term. And this can help you ease you in, and you can start making connections with other transfer students. You can also start looking at what clubs and organizations are on campus. You know, we're not just our science, and we are 3D humans with other interests. So it's a way to connect with others outside of your major as well. You are all a step ahead of the game by being a part of SACNAS. So make sure make sure you check and see if the campus you're transferring to has a SACNAS chapter, and reach out and let them know that you're interested in joining. And it's a lot easier said than done, but don't be afraid to ask for help. There are people on campus who are getting paid specifically to help you, and they want to see you succeed. And as with any transition in life, it may be helpful to see what counseling and psychological services are offered on your campus. They can have even self-care resources such as meditations. And remember, your mental health and overall well-being is first priority over your academics. And know that at the end of it all, your community college will always have your back. So make sure you check in with those professors or administrators that you work close with, and be honest about your transfer experience, and maybe they'll be helpful in pointing you in the direction of resources. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, my parents told me that I had to pay for college. And I'm very proud to say that I didn't have to take any loans to fund my undergraduate education. And so I realized that this list might be dated because I transferred in 2012. So I realized I might be missing a few things, but starting off, in Alexander's voice, he always says, apply, apply, apply. So apply to scholarships, internships, make sure you apply, especially to the scholarships offered at your community college. I know for me, these scholarships were a lot easier to get than some of the big national ones. And one scholarship that I wanted to mention, and I regret not applying to, is the Jack Kent Cook Transfer Scholarship. And this is basically a full ride to whatever university you transfer to. It's a $40,000 scholarship, and it's renewable for up to 3 years. And also internships are a great way to make money, all while gaining experience in your field. And be sure to fill out your FAFSA. Get as much federal money as you can. There are also many scholarships and university scholarships that need your FAFSA to determine eligibility and such, as well as grants. So it's important. The last resort is to supplement your funding with student loans. If you are eligible for subsidized loans, take it. And if you need more money, then take unsubsidized loans. Pretty much subsidized loans means that the federal government will pay interest while you're in school, rather than unsubsidized, where the interest will just start accruing the moment you borrow that money. Lastly, as students, we are on that rice and bean budget. So make sure you know exactly where your money is going. Using an app such as EveryDollar, Mint, or NerdWallet can be extremely helpful to just limit that frivolous spending and just hold you accountable. I personally use EveryDollar, and I love the app, and I can track all my spending and set up savings goals. Next slide. So now wrapping up my little section, I wanted to talk about failure and success. It's inevitable because failure and success do go hand in hand. Next slide. So what do you do when the chancla does get you? I know firsthand that, it's acceptance that really sort of guides you. It's all part of the process. And that's another thing that's a lot easier said than done. And for me, I still struggle with today. But the secret of all of it is to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Discomforting feelings are only temporary, and take everything with the beginner's mind, which is a concept from Zen Buddhism, which just means to approach everything free of preconceptions, expectations, and just be curious and open to all of the possibilities. And success is subjective, and you're able to define for yourself what success looks like to you. And no one has it figured out. And if someone tells you that they have it figured out, they're lying. Just kidding. Majority of the people don't know. Like myself, I don't know. I still don't know what the rest of my trajectory is going to look like. But I do know that I have so many more possibilities after I graduate with my PhD, which didn't seem like a possibility until about 6 years after I got my bachelor's degree. So don't be pressured to know it all. It's all a process, and you are learning little by little what you like and also dislike. Thanks so much for listening. And now I'll pass it over to Alexander.
Thank you so much, Lisa. So thank you everybody for listening to us. My name is Alexander Alvar. You can hit me up at my email or my Twitter handle. There's supposed to be an underscore right after doctor. That's my mistake. And right now I'm just going to go through introduce myself a little more intimately and let you know kind of where I'm from. As you can see over here on the left, I have done a lot of stuff. I'm right now doing my PhD in mechanical engineering, my undergrad. I did a bunch of bachelor's, got 3 at once, and then my associates, I went ahead and I started in a bunch of stuff. But over here on the right, this is where I really want to focus. And actually, Robin, can you click once? Yeah. And so I've been a bunch of places. And click one more time, please. But more specifically, I feel like whenever people ask me where I'm from, I always say like Southern California. And the reason why is because I really did grow up a lot of places. Over here in the pictures area, you can see in the top left of those pictures, my family. A huge family. That's just my brothers and sisters. I am the second oldest of 8, and we moved around a lot because we were poor. My older brother wasn't around, so I gotta act like that older person. You gotta wake everyone up, take everyone to school, and because we were kind of poor and we had a bunch of students, a bunch of kids that want to act like knuckleheads and not go to school. Sometimes we'd get in trouble, and sometimes we'd have to move, and sometimes we would have to move a lot and get evicted. And so I went to 4 different high schools and didn't graduate from a single one. On the very top, you can see the 4 different high schools I went to. Rubidoux High School, shout out to anyone who knows the IE. Over here, I went to Burbank High School over there in LA, well, near LA. Anyway, it's a whole different story. Moreno Valley High School, March Mountain High School. Some of you all know might know that's a adult school where they put all the trouble kids. And, past that, I didn't really graduate, so I was like, okay, well, what do I got to do? I got to work because I got a family. I got to take care. Just like King said, just like Robin's talking about, and just like Lisa was talking about, you got to work. And there's not much leeway here in our society besides finding and being productive, finding a way to be productive. And so I did a bunch of jobs. I did construction, I did forklift work, warehouse work, I did drywall, I did ultrasound, I did a bunch of things, ditch digging for a long time. I was a little barista for a little bit. And all through that, I kind of stayed a little knucklehead. And as you can see, right next to the left of the community college section, you can see me trying to post up and act all hard. And to the right of that, you can see me working really hard and falling asleep on my. In the middle, you can see the community college. I did a bunch of stuff because I had no idea what I wanted to do. My path was not set. My path was not determined. I started in psychology because I really liked the idea of understanding people. I went to social science because I wanted to improve the society around us and really understand people's behaviors, kind of how it reflected the society they came from. I did theoretical basket weaving at one point. No, I'm just playing. That's a joke. And so I ended up in engineering. And from there, I've transferred. I was lucky enough to find some good mentors, just like Robin was mentioning, and they helped me kind of craft the ideas around who I wanted to be. They helped me to kind of like inform my perspective of myself. And sometimes I look back and I think it's funny, this knucklehead standing here acting like it's hard, and just thinking about the types of things that I was willing to do back then for a very small amount of respect. And moving forward, I could see now that as soon as I grabbed a hold of the things I wanted to do, as soon as I crafted for myself a little bit of a semblance of a plan or a picture of who I wanted to be, it was really no stopping. I moved on to do my undergrad in UC Irvine. As you can see me right here, you can take the vato out of the hood, but you can't take the hood out of the vato. And and then over here, I did a triple major, aerospace mechanical materials. And at the bottom, you can see in the very bottom, I did a study abroad. I went to Canada. I went to where they grow the hockey players. And no, I'm just playing. But and I worked with the hospital doing neurosurgical pediatric robotics. Really small, tiny robotics that go in an MRI and potentially help children, hopefully help children overcome certain surgeries, overcome certain biopsy tests. And what you can see, though, is that I wasn't alone. Over here on the very bottom left, you can see a bunch of shaved heads. You can see a bunch of dudes with little tiny mustaches talking about, you know what, we went through it and we were still able to do it. And so if you click to the next slide, please. What a lot of people like to think about is how do you go through academia? And I'm sorry, we're all grad students. We are going to talk to you about getting to a PhD. We're going to talk to you about that grad school. Because if you think you're going to get out of a conversation with grad students and not hear about grad school, I'm sorry, you are wrong. And so we're going to talk about some of the transition points between community college, undergrad, doctorate degree, and hopefully that career. Click through once. And so we're going to talk about those position points. And the next one, click one more time, please. And we're going to talk about traditional. We're going to talk about, like, a lot of people had traditional routes. They went straight from high school into undergrad, got that doctoral degree, and maybe that's for them, and maybe that happens to them. But we also want to acknowledge that there are other paths. Just like Robin and Lisa and King were mentioning, we are examples that just because you had a hard, rough go through, just because things got in your way, and just because your path was a little non-linear, does not mean you can't make it. And so click next, please. We're going to talk about some unique routes where you have a lot of stops in between, maybe not stops, but detours in between, going to industry in between your undergrad and maybe a post-bac program. Some of you might not know about those. What that is an opportunity after you graduate to get into some research, to get into some classes and kind of improve on your record, to improve on your publication record, or to improve on your experience, as well as potentially take classes. And so click through one more time, please. We're going to talk about and recognize that a lot of people have life detours, change of professions over there, some family detour, and the ever present. We want to acknowledge and respect that we have all been going through this COVID detour together. And whether or not I know you, whether or not you know me, we've experienced this to varying degrees and to varying impacts. And unfortunately, in many different harmful ways, emotionally, physically, and mentally. And so next slide, please. I want to talk to you about what is graduate school and do I need it? And in case you were wondering, the TLDR is yes. Yes, you do need it. Graduate school is good for you. Please take your medicine. All right. Oh, whoa. Clicking through quick there. All right. So what I want to mention is that grad school across the board. First of all, the bare minimum, we want to talk about earnings. A lot of people, when they go to school, they're like, well, what am I going to do with it? What am I going to get with it afterwards? Well, I'll tell you right now, across all majors, for the entire US, at least for people 64-year-olds who had a bachelor's degree versus who had a master's degree, they saw an increase in 23%, which on average equaled about a 30K increase per year. That's 30K a year in your pocket extra, just for a little 1 to 2 years of education. I'm gonna tell you what, that's good. That's a good investment. If anyone told me I'm gonna get a 30K investment, return on my investment every single year for the rest of my life, I'm gonna take it. Because that's a vacation every single year. That's a big vacation every single. That's a car every single year. So next slide, please. Then we want to talk about what it looks like for the comparison between a bachelor's degree and a PhD. As you can see, as you can guess, it's a little bit more, approximately 3 times as much. On average, again, this is on average, this is including STEM degrees as well as non-STEM degrees. So you can imagine, if you're a STEM major, you're probably going to be bummed. And so what it's looked like is for people who are doing this and taking a PhD over a bachelor's, so going and investing another 5 years, a little bit longer, but that's okay. The 5 years are going to pass anyway, right? And so what that looks like is essentially a 90K return on your investment every single year. On average, it's not like as soon as you graduate, you're going to get that 90K. No, it's going to take a little time to build up, and you're going to get in your position, you're going to move up. But the point is that overall, you're more likely to earn about 100K over 10 years more than someone who has their bachelor's. That's a lot of money. I don't know about you. Next slide, please. So a lot of people think about, oh, well, I'm not going to find a job. Isn't that one of the biggest problems when you have a PhD? Aren't there all these tweets or all these memes out there about like, oh, I just graduated, but that unemployment though? Aren't there all these tweets about, oh, my friends, they have jobs, but I'm just sitting here on my mom's couch? And actually, that's kind of a large misconception. As you can see here, again, we're taking data from the US Census. What you can see is that on average, the doctoral degree has a third less unemployment rate. So that means there are less people unemployed overall across the US compared to every other position. What that means is it's actually the most employable position. Companies want it more. And so what that means is that you're essentially going to find a job. It may not feel like right away, but you're going to find a job. So next slide, please. So another argument people try to say, well, wouldn't I be overqualified if I get a higher degree? Wouldn't I be like this person that people are like, well, we were looking for a master's degree, but you have a PhD. I don't know if I can take it. But I don't know if you've ever seen this in most. So these are just some examples. We took them from a quick little search that we did about science positions that earn, I think, around 100K. And the idea is we wanted to compare them and say, well, how many of these actually have these requirements? And what you see is that they say the minimum requirement is a master's, but they say we would like 5+ years as well as PhD plus 2 years, right? What they really want, if think about it, if you come with your master's versus someone with a PhD, they're going to want that increase. They're going to want that extra experience. They're going to want that extra knowledge, especially if they're going to pay you the same. So that's something to think about. Next slide, please. There are many other benefits to getting a PhD or a master's, whichever one you want. Not saying don't get a master's, I'm saying whichever. Uh, Overall, you're more likely to be satisfied with your job. Overall, you're going to gain more skills. Overall, you're going to have a wider variety of degree options. Of employment options with your higher degree. And what this means is that people are going to want you, not only for the fact that you have those little words and letters in front of your name, but because of the fact that they know you can perform, they know you can accomplish things, and they know you know how to see things through to the end. Next slide, please. So one of the biggest issues, I'm low income. I came from a house where we got evicted a lot. Like, what about money? How am I going to afford this? Next slide. And I'm going to run through these probably a little quick. Essentially, a grad student instructor or a grad student researcher, these are positions where you can be a TA or a worker within a lab. So you can be a TA within a class for the university that you're going to go to, or you can be a worker within a lab. And so what this allows you to do is build money while you're actually in the position, especially in STEM degrees. You're more likely to get paid about the same as an entry-level position to do your degree. What this essentially means is you're being paid to go find a way to do the thing that you love and then get paid more after. It's like a really nice investment, I think. And so if you go to the next slide, other things you can think about when applying is to keep these in mind. The GRFP, some of y'all might have heard it already. The National Academies of Science, Engineering, Medicine, they have another one called the Ford. That's a really good one. The Hertz Fellowship, and of course, as many SACNAS might know, the NIH fellowships, and King is a master of those. I want to hit him up. And so go to the next slide, please. Other things to take into account, much like in your undergrad, there are these departmental or campus fellowships, and these are oftentimes hidden. These are oftentimes not presented as much, and so apply, no matter what, because I'll tell you what, when I was in undergrad, and even when I was in my grad position, I was in a position where I was like, I don't know if I should apply to this, and so they were like, come here, and they took me in the office, and they told me, for these, apply, be person number one, the first person to apply. No one applies to these. You're going to get the money. Just apply. And that was like my first lesson in the realization that some of these things are really unknown. Some of these things are hidden. And so you may be one of two people applying. So take that chance. Apply. Worst case scenario, you get experience in applying. And guess what? Sometimes they give you feedback. What that is they're basically telling you how to win it next time. And I don't know about you, but a 1 to 2 page essay for like $1,000, $30,000, even just like a few hundred, that's a lot of money for a little bit of work. So next slide, please. Definitely, financial aid is not just for undergrads. You can get the FAFSA even as a grad student. That's what I'll say. Do just like Lisa mentioned. Go get your if you're of that age where you have to get your parents' taxes, do that. Whatever you got to do, get that money because you don't want to have to pay for it. Next slide, please. So this is essentially the wrap up. We're going to talk about that final chunk la ricochet. Sometimes it bounces out the wall and hits you in the back of the head. So we want to do a wrap up. The next slide. So we're just going to leave these up so you can know and you can kind of get the general takeaway. And I think we're going to open it up for questions. Also, if you want to click through twice, there's a little funny thing happening. Yeah, it's got some, in every one of these, you got a chunkla. And if you click again, you just got to learn how to dodge it. Okay. All right. Yeah.
And I'll leave this
So yeah,
slide.
we're just going to open it up to questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll leave this slide up in case anyone wants to screenshot it or anything, or flex it on social media, what they learned today. But yeah, as Alexander said, we're open to questions. I'll leave this slide up for like maybe another 60 seconds, but y'all want to drop anything in the chat or unmute yourself?
Come on, y'all. I know it's Friday, but that's a good question. How do you explain that you failed a class or yeah, yeah, to your next college or internship? I'll just take this real quick. In general, you want to paint it as it's a learning experience. Yes, you faltered, but you're learning from that, and you're going to take it next time. Another thing I really like to do is right after if I mention a setback, like say my GPA might be low, or sometimes don't even mention it. A lot of people will say don't even bring attention to the mistakes, but if you do want to mention it, right after it, mention something really good that you did. So that way, it's like the last thing to remember is the good thing.
Yeah, and then I'll chime in there because my transcript damn near has a whole alphabet on it. And I've had my fair shares of D's and F's and W's. And the W's, I think, were what made me feel the most uncomfortable. And I rightfully did have to explain that when I was applying for grad school and when I was applying to transfer. The best way that I worked around that was, or not even worked around it, addressed it, was by explicitly stating my GPA may not look competitive, but it's also not a reflection of who I really am and what I can do in the classroom. That there's just certain things that happen in the classroom that are not entirely responsive to the way I learn. I'm very hypervisual and auditory type of learner. Um, and that life happens. I think King mentioned earlier in the chat about working. I was working 3 to 4 jobs at any given time during my undergraduate career. And so that was something I also mentioned that in my essays that my grades may have took a hit, but like I was persistent. I was taking care of my responsibilities, both in academics and my personal life. And I hope that that's something that you can acknowledge that I could bring to your institution. So I would say, find the best way you could put it in your words to let your full self show and be expressed.
That's a good point. And I see Sean Dudgeon in the chat. Is any thoughts about being an older student? I'm currently 46 and I would like to go after PhD, but worry about being employed in my 50s. Yeah, I completely understand that. I didn't go straight from high school, and I would say it really depends on what you want. This is all, again, you have to pay attention to what your goal is and kind of work backwards from there to reverse engineer the goals that you want. And so if you want to do the PhD for a position that you really want, maybe it's a better question might be, what do I need for that position and how do I get it as soon as possible? Others, other than that, if you're really just looking for the PhD experience, then go ahead and take it. That those 4 or 5 years are going to pass anyway. I always say, normally across 10 years, unless you're doing like phenomenal or somehow make the money make the company a whole new set of clients or make a bajillion dollars for the company, you're probably not going to move up in the pay brackets that you will expect. So if you think about money, over 10 years, you're probably going to have a better return on investment from the degree. But aside from that, the type of position that you're going to have isn't going to change much unless you keep on jumping around to positions. I hope we answered that okay.
Yeah, and then do we have any other last pressing questions? I do know we have to hold space to transition to the next session. Where can we find this recording? That might be a Daniela question. Joel Madison writes, I guess this goes along the lines of knowing that eventually you'll slip up and or fail, but as a transferring community college student, I assume that the difference in terms of difficulty of coursework and academic demands of a community college and university is going to get me pretty early on. Do you think expecting that is a good perspective? You know who might have a good answer for that is Lisa Torres.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I definitely, I think I kind of mentioned a few of the sort of how I should have maybe prepped. But for me, it was definitely the rigor of being at Berkeley and also I think prestige. And I think you kind of, as in that transition, you're more susceptible to falling into imposter syndrome and kind of getting lost through that. So I wouldn't say, spend your whole summer and study on, all the basics, like enjoy, have fun with your life and, kind of take it as you get it. If you're really, really struggling, reach out to your classmates, reach out to the professor, the teaching assistants, even your department. There are resources out there that can help you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that about closes it out, and I'll share, my own quickly my own experience. I mentioned in the chat, I went on academic probation after my first semester of transferring to San Francisco State, and I was just like, damn, like I was not expecting that to happen, but it does happen, and I went through very personal ordeals. I lost another friend right before finals. Like life happens. And to Sean's point earlier about, the non-traditional path, I dropped out of college 4 times. Like, I think the better, and this dives into that asset-based framework that I'm thinking about, like detaching ourselves and decolonizing our mind from this idea of deficit model thinking and thinking of us in terms of the assets we have. But like, to answer Sean's question, a bit more directly, think of it more so as you're one of the very few people in this country that is working towards something that very few have. I think only about 1/3 of the people in this country have a bachelor's degree, and the numbers get even smaller as the degrees get higher. And to have that as your perspective, that you're working towards something that uh, others are not able to always access, due to a variety of issues, but you're making it happen. And I think that goes for everyone in the space. You're still moving, you're still progressing, and that's something you should always hold dear to yourself, that you are like in the matrix, avoiding all these chanclas coming your way.